Welcome to the Well, Wild, and Free podcast, where the evidence-based meets the esoteric. I'm your host, Bria Hamlet. Join me and industry experts as we work through the 8 dimensions of wellness and truly uncover what it means to be holistically well, wild, and free. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome everyone back to the Well, Wild, and Free podcast. As always, I'm your host, Bria Hamlet. Today I have another special guest here to discuss all things hair and well-being. Welcome to Courtney. Courtney Grayton is a natural hair stylist and educator. She's your go-to for healthy hair care, especially for beautiful locks. She's also the CEO of Froetry, and she provides natural hair care that is specifically catering to the 4C and community, or the 4 community. I'm a big fan of the products as well. She has multiple social media platforms and over 50,000 followers across those platforms. So she absolutely is in her expert bag. And she's really been integral to teaching people how to unlearn things about their hair care, especially as Black people. There are a lot of things that we've learned and internalized over the years. And Courtney is really creating space for us to love and embrace our hair just the way that it shows up. So thank you so much, Courtney, for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Of course. I was thinking, I knew I wanted to talk to somebody about hair, but it was kind of like, okay, I know who I want to talk to. And I was like, I'm ready. When I'm ready to launch this podcast, I know who I'm reaching out to. So I'm excited that you agreed. It's just been a joy to watch you evolve, from the sidelines with the business, but also really getting into the creator space and sharing information with people about how to take care of their hair, especially given that we're in this sort of like after wave, I feel like, of like YouTube and natural hair. I feel like there was like a solid 5 years where that was just like, that's what I was watching at least. And to see a resurgence with you, especially around locks, because I'm just so curious. Like, it seems like there's a lot more people locking their hair, and that might just be me from the outside looking in. But yeah, it's been a joy to watch you and an honor to have you here.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So without telling us more about what you do, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. My name is Courtney. I would consider myself a natural born creative. I've been creating since I can remember, since my parents can remember. And so I think everything I've done since then has kind of been in the creator space. Typically don't really go for a lot of traditional type of work. I am neurodivergent. I love to say that proudly. I'm empathic and a very relatable woman. I love to learn and share that knowledge with others. And overall, I just love to have fun. I love to dance. I love to laugh and just go with the flow in life. Not a structured person at all, but I just love to live and have fun.
I stand a person who's like, I love to live. I love all of the things. And also being out and proud about being neurodivergent. Like, I have ADHD, and we've talked quite a bit about it. Mm-hmm. And how so many creators and creative people live with this, in part because it's just, we have so many ideas and we need to get them out. Yeah, I feel like it just like goes hand in hand. So
exactly.
And it also, I feel like, dispels a lot of the myths that we've been told about what it means to live with something like ADHD. I feel like it's just been widely misunderstood. And so it's cool to see people, experiencing and living with this really real thing, but also navigating and putting our art out there in the world.
And thriving, yes.
Yes, thriving. That's a whole conversation in and of itself, of like the research or lack thereof.
Exactly.
It's interesting because when I think about the work that you do and when I think about health and hair, I do feel like they go hand in hand in many ways, right? Like, we have seen the evolution of hair care. We've seen the lawsuits. I'm sure you've probably seen a lot of them coming out now around relaxers and things that women are, folks in general who've used them, experiencing the long-term impacts. And when I think about well-being, I know it's defined differently from person to person, but how would you define well-being?
I like to describe it as just the state of your emotional, physical, and mental health. And I guess overall your satisfaction with life. Like, that's kind of how I define it for myself.
I love that. Yeah, your overall satisfaction with life is, to me, like, as a health educator, the most comprehensive definition. Like, going beyond the physical, going beyond, the mental. Like, how do you feel? Is your quality of life where you want it to be? Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. And growing up, what was your relationship to health and wellness like?
So I'll start by saying I think the emotional and the mental health part was just like completely neglected. It was not talked about at all. I think that's very common for most of the people in the Black community. You know, we just had parents and family, the older generation, who just didn't talk about it, didn't even have like resources to have the language to begin to talk about it. So those were definitely neglected. Now, when it comes to like physical health, my parents made sure, I have two siblings, my parents made sure that we were pretty much always in some type of program, always in sports, being very active. We couldn't stay idle at all. There was no sitting in the house during the summertime. We were in some type of camp. So I would say as far as physically, I was pretty much healthy and in shape a lot. As far as nutrition, we could have done a little better. We were known as the snack house. Like all of my friends knew they could come over and have just snacks on snacks and juice and all of that. Around high school was when my mother, I think, you know, some things happened as far as like her health, and the doctor was just kind of like, you got to get it together. And she pretty much whipped us all in shape. Like she was taking the Kool-Aid out the fridge. Like, I'm not getting no more juice. I'm going to get water. You're going to, you know, really started putting some rules in place about how much sugar we could consume and stuff. And honestly, it wasn't that hard for us to just kind of follow suit. And so I would say around high school was when we really started to pay attention to what we were actually putting in our bodies, because obviously that's sometimes even more important than, you know, being active. You know, I was kind of like on the outside looked very healthy, but of course just consuming so much sugar and all the wrong meals didn't help. So yeah, around high school is when we started to pay more attention to like what I was consuming.
It's interesting because I feel like in the Black community, it's always those three things, right? Like we, generally speaking, understand the value of moving our bodies, like that, you know, there's a reason why there are so many Black athletes. Like that's not really lost on us, you know, but when it comes to food and the snack thing, like when you said we were the snack house, like I completely relate. We had snacks on deck, still loves a good snack. And
yeah, same.
I mean, it's just like, it's easy. And especially like, again, you know, sidebarring to being, you know, dealing with neurodiversities, but like we snack, that's like a tendency to get our meals throughout the day. We're not like usually like 3-course meal people. And so snacking isn't necessarily bad. It's just what's there. And are you enjoying those snacks in moderation? And like, I remember when my mom decided to cut things back and she was just like, I'm not going to buy Oreos anymore. And we all were just like, but
I remember that.
But we like Oreos. Like
my mom was like, there's a 2 Oreo maximum or something. She started going by the service size. It's like, no, you know, I go in there and get the whole row of 6 or 7, however many.
And like so many people don't know the serving sizes. Exactly. Like, and you know, that's an equity thing, but it's also like, truly, I feel like I just reach in the package and to the ancestors are like, that's enough. And I'm like, okay, I'm good. Like that. Other than that, when I realized it was 2, I was like, oh my gosh. Like,
it's crazy. And then I think she started getting the thins, the Oreo thins. And it's like, okay, I'm going to eat double now. Like, right.
Like I see what you were trying to do.
Exactly.
It didn't quite work out, but hey, you know, we tried. And you know, it's wild when I think about, you know, our parents trying to do what they could with the information that they had, right? Like, okay, I know this nutrition label is here. It's federally mandated to be there. So let me go ahead and at least look and try to help my family out, help myself out.
Yep.
But sugar is in everything and it's hard to get away from it. So kudos to her for trying when you were in high school, you know, like that still was ahead of the curve for many, many families. When I think about even that idea of like, also the emotional and mental health not really being touched upon, a lot of what you do taps into people's emotional well-being. It probably shows up in the way that they show up in your chair, or the conversations you're having. And so that's essentially the theme of this episode is emotional well-being. And just for those who are listening, to define it, emotional well-being includes your ability to successfully handle life stresses and adapt to change and difficult times. So yeah, there's a lot. That's a loaded phrase.
Yeah.
But I like that the definition isn't solely just mental well-being, but truly your emotional well-being, because they aren't necessarily the same, but they do go hand in hand.
I agree.
All right, so we're going to switch gears into the Show Me the Stats segment of the episode. So, Courtney, this is when I'm going to give you a couple of different statistics that I think are relevant to our conversation and get your authentic response. So, the first one comes from a 2023 article from the Harvard Business Review. And they had 3 stats back to back that I thought were kind of interesting. So, the first one is that more than half of Black women surveyed for this particular article felt like they had to wear their hair straight in a job interview to be successful. And 2/3 of those women reported that they had changed their hair for a job interview. In that same vein, 1/5 of the Black women surveyed between the ages of 25 and 34 have been sent home from work because of their hair. And 1/4 of the Black women surveyed believed they were denied a job because of their hair. So I'll pause there. What are your thoughts?
I 100% believe it because I even had that pressure myself. I remember when I did go for a more traditional accounting job, it was actually to move to New York. So I had a virtual interview and I slapped the wig on like right before I logged on. And kind of not related, but still in the beauty portion of it, I remember them still commenting on my nails. Like my nails were a little long and it was just like, well, are you going to fix those before you start this accounting job because you're typing? And I'm like, what? I fixed my hair. We're still talking. We still have to come from my appearance. So I knew even in that moment that had I not put the wig on, I probably would have been, they would have either probably not asked about my hair, but there would have been some thoughts around that. I've also had a friend be fired because they kept asking her about her faux locks. She told them she had just gotten them before she got the job. And with us, we want to get our money's worth. I'm like,
we're in style
for a month. And they did not keep her before, she ended up taking them out. She got fired. Of course, they gave some other excuse, but, she knew it was about that because that was the only thing they kept asking her about. So I think it's so unfortunate, that we're still, that's an article from 2023 and that, people still feel that. But I definitely know it's absolutely true. I know people who still, have that pressure, whether it's even showing up online, whether it's like, going to a job interview or whatever, that you're going to be judged in some way or deemed not as smart or what is just so ridiculous to me. But there's just this view of people with froze or natural hair that, we're less capable. I think even, the pressure to have braids, I think it kind of gives, even though it is braids, it's more sleek. And so some people even have the pressure to have braids, even if they're not straightening their hair, having braids kind of gives more of an illusion that you have like a straighter hair. It's not kinky or whatever. And yeah, it's so unfortunate.
I feel like that's something you saying it just now, I hadn't actually thought about. Like, oh, there is an idea in my mind that like braids are like the next more professional step versus just wearing like, my natural hair out. And it's absurd because, on one hand, that's blatant discrimination, but these companies find that workaround all the time because your performance or, whatever other thing they can latch onto. And it does impact your emotional health because you're going into this interview or you're going into work thinking, what are they going to have to say about what's on my head? And I definitely know before interviews, my mom has been like, so how are you going to wear your hair? And the stress of like, oh, should I straighten it? Should I put it in a bun? Like, what should I do? And a lot of us do the bait and switch where we might show up with the hair straight or some braids or whatever. Let day one come and it's like,
that's exactly what I did.
Oh, I didn't recognize you. You're just like, I bet you didn't. But it's also like, we shouldn't have to go through that. Like, we shouldn't have to go through that. And we see it too with, folks of all genders, but with men as well, like the pressure to not wear their hair longer. And if you're going to have locks, the pressure to have them constantly retwisted, which isn't even, I'm imagining not healthy for the scalp.
I recently had a client, I had a consultation. He wants to start his locks, but he's in law enforcement. And he's just like, I want to do it so bad, but I know they're going to, tell me or, continuously be on me about keeping them neat. Can I come in every 2 to 3 weeks? I'm like, I don't do that. It's just not healthy. And because I'm such a stickler for, teaching people about the health. I'm like, I know your job, I know that, but we need to find a workaround, of how we can still go some extra time to make sure your hair stays healthy. And then, you want to keep your job. I don't want to make you lose your job.
Yeah.
But, even the fact that he has to think about that when just wanting to get a style that a lot of Black people have. And like you said, locks are becoming more popular. So he just wants to join the community and he has to think about losing his job,
Yeah. It's... Whew. So many feelings. So many feelings around that. Well, that takes me into our next statistic. So this comes from thecrimson.com. They posted an article this year as well, 2023, and they pulled together a couple of different pieces of data. But there was a survey done on 359 women across New York City, and they confirmed their racial patterns and their hair product usage. And they compared Black women, it looks like, to Latina and white women. And of course, we know that like Afro-Latino people exist. And I feel like this data often, this is that. But essentially what the study found was a link between the use of a hair oil, they didn't say which one, and the number of women who were reporting having their first period before age 12, as well as developing breast cancer later in life. And so basically they found that the women who were using it were twice as likely to develop their periods early and or breast cancer. What are your thoughts?
Ooh. I've never heard that. That is like mind-boggling to me, but it does kind of line up. If we're talking about, people using hair oil, obviously the majority of us use it. I think I've seen a surgence of like white people using oil online now, but definitely know years ago they weren't. And with breast cancer affecting Black women much more, it makes sense. And I think it just goes to show how little research is done when it comes to like beauty products and how they affect Black women. Had they been doing these studies years ago when they should have, may have saved a lot of us. I have breast cancer runs in my family, and to even think that it could be caused or even linked to the hair products we've been using, just to, again, like fit the stereotype or like, just fit the standards. We're trying to use oil to grow our hair longer, to make it look more sleek. It's so crazy how all the things kind of are interlinked and webbed together.
It's like a domino effect.
Yeah, literally.
It's like I'm trying to assimilate, so I'm going to do this thing, but then I have to worry about continuing to assimilate, even though that might be jeopardizing my actual physical health.
Yeah.
On top of the other things that are impacted. And it's like, would I choose my financial health or my physical health or my emotional health? Like they're all pitted against each other. And I know that a lot of traditional, say, Black hair care products, the ingredients that they were using were what were affordable or available, and especially these companies that didn't have a single Black person on their research and development team, a single Black scientist. There was no care or thought into like, are these chemicals endocrine disrupting? Are these chemicals that could cause cancer? Which are two of the reasons why someone would start a period early or develop breast cancer, because they're being exposed to these things, and we're exposing ourselves every day. Like I know I put a little bit of gel and a little bit of hair oil on this hair every day. And reading that the first time, I was like, let me go look at these jars. Like it immediately made me like pause, like, let me go look. And I was even troubled to find like there's a brand that I really adore. And I don't think this is representative of the founder at all. This is one of those things that happens when your company gets bought. She beat breast cancer once. She unfortunately succumbed to it eventually. You might know who I'm talking about. But I was reading one of the bottles, and it had the last ingredient was a known carcinogen to cause breast cancer. And I was just like, she started this brand to create hair care products to help women who have experienced cancer regrow their hair. And all these years later, y'all have a known carcinogen in the hair butter? Like, and I'm just like looking at the jar, like, what do I do? I've already used it. I've probably used it plenty of times before I actually noticed that.
I think it comes down to, also like the access to certain products. Like I know, people who are less fortunate don't have as much privilege to buy more expensive products. might look at that carcinogen and be like, well, this is all I can afford. So, whatever the case may be. And I think, yeah, it's hard because I've had that conversation also being within the hair care product like field. Obviously, Frotry is not huge to the point where someone wants to buy it yet, but
it's coming.
People ask me all the time, like, would you sell the company? Who would you sell it to? Kind of what are my boundaries? What are my, where's my cutoff? And that's been a huge thing for me. I think that there are enough Black people who have enough money to purchase my company. I think those would be the people who I'm looking to first, because I need to make sure that those things are being considered. It's like once you put your company, I don't fault people because, generational wealth is a thing and most of us are looking to attain that. So when you're selling to a huge conglomerate, like it makes sense. Like my life is set from now on, my, generations from now, my family will be set. So I definitely don't fault people, but I think that's where things can get tricky. And, because those companies are not most likely not looking at these studies or even caring, because they know most of us aren't even going to look at the ingredients, So I think there's just overall negligence when it comes to, how people view or even like vet these ingredients that go into our products. Is kind of like, oh, if it's going to make the bottom line like lower, if it's going to make this product last on the shelf much longer, like let's just go with it. They're not going to pay attention anyway. It's so unfortunate.
And that's a lot of what it is. It's the product is able to be cheaper because it can stay on the shelf longer. And that's with most things we consume. When you're looking at a package and the number of preservatives versus like, when people always are like, why is natural and organic more expensive? It's like, because it doesn't last as long. They got to move that product off the shelf quickly. And unfortunately, when you're getting bought out, like you said, by a big company and they're trying to get this stuff out here and it needs to last in every corner of Walmart, Target, you name it, they're not interested in a product that's going to expire, become rancid, quickly, which speaks to our larger issue of like how much we're consuming and all of the things. But it is interesting. And for folks who are interested, I'll put this in the show notes, but there's a website called the Environmental Work Group. They're actually an organization, but I believe it's ewg.org. And they actually look at products and rank them by risk level. So if you're concerned or if you see an ingredient and you're like, I have no idea what that is, because a lot of it's like, if you don't have a little bit of a science or a medical or a health background, you don't even have the time to know what you're reading. Like I can go into, look at the different research studies because that's my background in public health, or if you've done any sort of science work, but the average person, like you said, is not going to, one, take the time, but two, even know what they're looking at once they Google it. So definitely a resource to look into if you are concerned. And honestly, even doing like a cabinet scan, like how many things am I exposing myself to on any given day that have all these
need to do that. Yeah, I think I've just kind of go off of what people recommend online, of course, like influencers, especially when it comes to like skincare and makeup, like those things I rarely look up to see how safe they are. So I'll definitely look into that resource. Think when it came to deciding the products that I wanted to create and have in my company, I even made it a point then to kind of research every single product that the manufacturer was using. And I even went as far as to on the site kind of list all the ingredients. And I don't know if it's like that on my current site, but definitely in the past, you could click each ingredient and it'll go to a page that will show okay, this ingredient came from a plant originally, even though it's a chemical, whatever. But I even found then that people weren't clicking on it. They didn't even care. So, I think it is important for us to continue to, like I said, vet those products and make sure that we are doing our due diligence to make sure we're not putting people in harm's way.
Yes, appreciate that. Definitely the actual thoughtfulness, especially for our people, just goes so far. And then the last stat I wanted to share with you comes from a Refinery 29 article. It's referencing a study that was done by Mintel in 2020. And it says that Black women are the biggest consumers of hair care products in the Western world, spending $1.7 billion in 2020 on hair care. Not surprised. Not surprised.
Not surprised at all. And especially with that being 2020, it was crazy to me to see how much my product still sold in 2020. I knew that, sales would go down. They actually went up by a lot. And I think it's because we were, stuck inside. We weren't able to go to our normal hairstylists and things like that. But even before then and after then, we were still spending like that much money on it. Again, it goes back to the pressure that we have to keep our hair tamed. And then also, I think there's just oversaturation in the market. And I think you kind of touched on consumerism and how much we consume. I think even with YouTube and like influencer culture, we're just constantly being sold new products, new hair products. And I know before I had my own products, like I was definitely a product junkie. I had so many products, and most of my clients have a lot of products. It's just like we're constantly trying to find the next best thing that's going to get our hair hydrated, moisturized. And I think it also speaks to the lack of quality products because we're trying so many things. If you were to get one product and it works really well, you will probably stick with that one. But having to try so many of them kind of makes us hoard them and just continue to spend more and more money.
And they're not cheap. You know what I mean? Like, especially if you are trying to read the ingredients and you do want, it to be safe or natural or organic, that bumps the price point up. And it's just, again, wild to me because it's like, we're spending all this money on this hair care products, trying to make our hair suitable for the workplace, for the job that we may or may not be able to keep.
Yep.
Like, we're just like shelling all this money out. And again, I think about how heavily that can weigh on our psyche, just feeling like, good, like we truly have to plan our hair out ahead of time for pretty much everything. I had to do a lot of work internally to make that a joyful thing instead of something that felt like a burden. Because it can feel like, why do I have to think about this like 3 months out? Like, I know I'm going on this trip. I need to book my braids for here, or I have a job interview, so I need to, wash, twist, etc. before here. And trying to find the joy in that, it's been a practice. It's definitely been a practice. And I imagine that you see that being a stylist, being someone who has created products, who has a brand, seeing that showing up in your clients, the toll that it can take.
For sure. I think even within, I would say it started for myself, like when I was younger, and my mom and my sister were mainly the people who did my hair, and kind of even their attitude about like wash day and like the day that it came to style my hair. I didn't give them an easy time either, but I think that kind of just like translated into, as I grew older, just like dreading the day that I had to either get my hair done or do my hair. And I definitely see that within my clients. I think a lot of us kind of grew up in the same space, especially if we have type 4 hair, where it's kind of like, here we go again. Like, I got to detangle, I got to, cornrow, blow dry, whatever the case may be. And even now, like when I have consultations, locks are so much more popular now. I think especially within the DMV. And when I have consultations, the first question I ask is like, how long have you been considering getting locks? And like, how did you get here? And I would say the majority of the time, everyone's like, I'm just tired. Like, I'm tired of having to figure out what I'm going to do next. Even though with locks, you kind of have to decide like, what style am I going to get, or when am I going to go? But for a fact, I'm getting a retwist. Like, for a fact, it's just a retwist in the style. I just need to look on Pinterest and decide what I'm getting next. It just makes it kind of so much easier, as opposed to like, am I going to get braids? And then, how much is it going to cost? You kind of already know exactly what your budget is going to be every month or every 2 months, however often you're going to get it done. And it takes a lot of that, like the thinking out of your hair. It's like, my hair is already done. I just can make it a little bit neater, or if I decide not to and kind of do a little semi-freeform, you're able to do that as well. So I definitely see it within my clients, just like, I'm tired. I just want to get locks, so I don't have to think about that part, whether I have kids or I'm in school, I just have like a busy schedule. I just don't have the time. So I see it all the time.
It's interesting because I'm like, there's still work. Like, it's still work. I mean, I had locks. It was pretty short-lived because I started mine right before the pandemic, and girl, I was not prepared. Yeah. It's not prepared to be a at-home loctician. And I was like, you know what? I will revisit this at a later time in my life, and ended up cutting my hair off, which was also beautiful in another way. But I get that because I was there. Like, I just can't. I just can't. I'm tired. And it bums me out because our hair is so beautiful and unique. It like defies gravity, and yet the heaviness that we feel, and it makes me wonder how much of that is society and how much if that is just truly that it is, our hair is delicate and it does require a little extra attention. With that in mind, that actually leads well into the next question I had for you, which is, how are some ways that you can tell someone's health might be going awry through their hair?
From my experience, even in my personal life as well as in my clients, like, your hair is usually one of the first things to kind of get neglected when it comes to like your mental health suffering or your physical health. I've encountered clients who have like literally left their hair alone for months, or, months at a time, even as long as 10 years. I had a client who like did not touch her locks because like she had her own health issues, as well as dealing with or just caring for her child who had some serious health issues. And she was like, I couldn't do it. And then that kind of tied into the shame that she had around her hair. And she didn't even come to anyone for 10 years because she's like, no one's going to accept me. So that's usually what I see. On a smaller scale, just like dryness, people just go day to day and it's like, I'm not doing nothing to it, especially with locks. It's kind of like, oh, my hair's already done. I can just put it up or put it back, tie it up in a hair wrap or whatever, so that they don't have to think about it. And the majority of the time, my clients will kind of come in. There's still a lot of shame, even when coming to a stylist. I usually have to tell people, like, I promise you, I've seen everything. Like, I've seen all levels of like neglect when it comes to hair, but people will come in immediately. It's like, girl, my last month has been crazy. I haven't done anything to my hair. Please excuse it, and blah, blah, blah. And so I'm usually spending a lot of time telling people like, it's okay. I promise you, like, I've neglect my hair all the time. There's sometimes most times I don't go to sleep and tie my hair up. So like, you do not have to be ashamed when you come to me. I'm here to help get your hair back healthy and, hydrated. Or even if you're not caring for your hair for a whole month and you come to me, I'm here to like help you at least for the next few weeks, So yeah, I see it all the time. And like I said, people usually get locks to kind of like get a break from doing their hair, but then don't notice that they just completely neglect it. But again, it's okay. Like, I see it all the time.
Yeah, it's like when you go to your physician, and I feel like people feel the same way. I'm like, I know I need to be moving my body more. I know I need to not be eating. And the doctor's like, you're here now. So it's a similar experience. And I also think it goes kind of like what you said. It can feel so overwhelming, your hair, that naturally it's the one thing where it's like, I'm going to just put this scarf on and call it a day. Or I'm going to put this hat on, or whatever it is you can do, or leave these braids in as long as I can go, as long without a retwist as possible.
Yep.
I've definitely seen it in myself. And then, of course, the domino effect, like you spoke to. Well, now it looks terrible. I really can't let anybody help me. It's nice to know that you're creating a space where your clients can release some of that shame. And also a reminder to folks, people listening, that if you notice yourself starting to neglect your hair, maybe do a check-in with yourself emotionally. Like, how am I feeling? Like, am I good? And if you're not good, trying to take some time to figure out why, I think could go a long way for a lot of people. For sure.
When I just normally wear my hair as it is, I've gotten to a place where I know I have type 4 hair, and that the majority of people when I'm walking around like are probably looking at me like, what is she doing with her hair? But I've come to accept it so much that sometimes I'm just like, I'm just going to not do anything for 3 weeks because I don't care what anybody thinks or, whatever. But then I have to check in with myself, but like, your hair is dry, girl. Like, why haven't you done anything, And I'm fortunate enough to have like my sister and like other stylist friends who I could go to like get my hair washed or whatever. But it happens a lot, especially with ADHD, especially with like going through different journeys and anxiety, depression, whatever the case may be. Like, I'm constantly checking in with myself. And I think it helps, me to be more compassionate when it comes to my clients and not like adding to the shame. Like, girl, what have you been doing? It's more like, I get you. I was just there last week. Like, let's figure it out.
Like, oh, that's you. I was just, yeah.
Yes.
It actually makes me think that it makes more sense why we spend so much money on hair care, whether it's services or products, because it is self-care for us. Like, it is probably one of the primary ways that, Black folks get to take care of ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
because everything else is constantly, put under jeopardy or whatever. But the idea of, like, when I know I have a hair appointment coming up, like, it's like Christmas. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I got the braided hair, like, ready to go. I'm like, I can't wait. It's the best feeling. Even if I'm like, I know she's gonna look at me like, girl, why your head look like this? It's a beautiful feeling. And also to share that with another Black person and to be able to take care of each other in that way, that very unique and special way. It's the catch-22 of, like, it's sacred, and also, like, we shouldn't have to do so much, and it's sacred and we shouldn't have to do so much. So it's an important point to remember too, like, we are worth investing in.
Mm-hmm.
I just hate that we're spending money on things that are also, like, giving us issues down the line. I guess you take the good and the bad with it all. And thinking about your clients coming in, you have clients coming in, all different types of your availability, and their energy might be different. How do you hold space for your clients energetically and emotionally?
I think it starts with just like an inviting space. So I've been told from my clients that the salon in general is just like a very calming space. They come in, it's, decorated nicely, and it just feels calm. Mm-hmm. And so that's very, very important for me to create a space where, people can feel like they can release and that they can just be exactly how they want to be. I recently created an option for a quiet appointment because I noticed, I'd have some clients who are just generally like talkative and like, will come in, but then they might have a couple appointments where like they come in and I can tell something's kind of weighing on them and they don't want to talk about it. So you have an option to kind of choose to have a quiet appointment, whether you want to just zone out, whether you want to work, whatever the case may be. You don't really feel pressured to update me on your life or to have a long conversation. So, and that kind of comes from me also feeling that way too. There are just some times where I don't need to talk. Like, I'm coming in, I want you to do my hair. Like, let me just sit there and like get my hair done and watch TV. So that's very important for me. And also just not making, like I touched on before, not making people feel ashamed or adding to the shame they may already have about how they show up. If you already have been like feeling a way about how you've been neglecting your hair and you come in and I'm like, girl, just like adding to it, it doesn't help either of us. It just doesn't add to a pleasurable experience. You should be able to kind of just let go. And even kind of contrary to the quiet appointment, my clients pretty much know they can come in and talk to me about whatever. I think it's kind of understood within the Black community that barbershops and hair salons, you kind of could come in and just talk whatever. Yeah. And I think it helps for me because most people find me on YouTube and they already kind of get a vibe of my my personality and like my relatability through my videos. So most people kind of come in like, oh, you're my bestie. Like, I'm ready to talk, what's going on. And so I notice most people kind of come in and already feel comfortable, which is great. And I really do encourage it. There are some days where I might not be feeling the best emotionally, but, my clients are there to pick me up. And, it's usually a relationship that evolves and gets much stronger over the years, especially with locks. Like, most people don't bounce around to locticians. So I'll have clients who turn into besties or like they feel like cousins, and that's very, very important for me. I think before I became a hairstylist, like, I was kind of ish a people person, but like not really. I'm just like a textbook introvert. Mm-hmm. But I found much more comfort in like sharing with people who may even be strangers, and like really reap the benefits from, exchanging energies emotionally or, energetically with people. And I love that all of my clients are Black. So, it just works.
Yes. The joy of like knowing that that's already a built-in part of your business has got to be amazing. And I love that quiet appointment. It makes me think of like the quiet rides with like Uber and Lyft of like,
yes.
Which I really appreciate. Cause like you said, some days I might be feeling a little chatty and other days I'm like, please don't talk to me.
Yes.
I don't have the brain power to have a conversation. And that's good because it also gives your client even the opportunity to think like, what do I need today? That's really self-aware. And I think something that a lot of people could probably take some notes from. And, again, similarly, just like flowing right into my next question for you, what are some practices that you do to physically take care of yourself after a day of styling? Like you're on your feet, you're using your hands. What do you do?
I would say the most consistent thing I do is like a very light stretch. I definitely want to get into more like deep stretching, but it's usually kind of out of habit because my back is hurting and like, my wrists are hurting. So I do like just a quick touch my toes, quick stretch after styling. I also usually kind of sit down. Like I don't usually walk straight out of the salon. I do sort of kind of a deep decompress before I like leave to go home. And so I usually just was like sit down and rest and eat because like just with ADHD as well, I'll forget to eat. And like once I get in the steamroll of like clients and they're back to back, it's just like I'll forget to have a whole meal. So I make sure to have a meal before I leave the shop because if I get home, I might forget again. And so like those are the main things that I do: stretch and eat. And maybe chill for a little bit, watch a show or catch up on my text messages or anything like that. And then, that's usually it.
I love that. You're making me think, I'm like, maybe I'll put together some like stretches for like stylists because it is a very specific, like, specific posture and like a lot of bending, a lot of hinge movement. So that's definitely something that I'm like, oh yeah, there's a need there. But that's really good that you are making time for that, or you're pausing. And I love that you're also remembering to eat because like, that it is so real. Like, and it sounds nuts to me sometimes when I say it out loud, but like, we will just forget to eat. Like the hunger won't be there. And then all of a sudden you'll be like starving.
I'm hangry now.
I'm hangry. We've skipped hungry. I'm hangry.
Yes.
And now I'm going to eat the whole bag of potato chips because that's what's there. And it's tough. It could be tough to navigate, making sure that you have those snacks that are going to keep you balanced. Because that's the other thing. It's like, not that we're talking about food, but what you put into your body really dictates how your brain feels, how your gut feels. All that is connected. And if your body doesn't have fuel, it doesn't matter what you eat if it's not actually going to do anything for you. And so it's a struggle. But I love that you take that time physically for yourself. And what about emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, all of those sort of things?
Yeah, I think that decompress is usually the best part for my emotional health, especially since I mentioned like I'm an introvert. So spending 8-9 hours touching people and talking all day, even watching the TV and kind of taking in so much because that's usually what I'm doing. I spend a lot of time watching TV because my clients are watching TV. And so I'll spend a lot of time in silence. I live alone and like I love to spend alone time. So usually 99% of the time, like after work, I'm by myself unless I have like a prior engagement. And usually like that's the best thing. I've also like incorporated meditation, even like especially before I go to bed and when I wake up, so that like I'm like clearing my mind from the day, but then also like preparing myself for the day when I wake up. So that's been great, as well as just journaling. Sometimes I'll have like very heavy, work days where like, even recently had a client, long-term client. I love her. She's 70, in her 70s, like late 70s. And, she kind of feels like a grandma. We have really good conversation. And she just came in and like released that her husband is dying. And I was like, whoa, I didn't expect that at all, but it definitely weighed on me because I really, really care for her. Never met her husband, but I know how much he means to her and how long they've been married. So, being able to journal about that later to kind of just get it off my mind before I went to sleep was great. And I noticed that like it just helped me when it came to my next day sometimes, or even before I had a lot of these practices in, like I would just feel heavy and you can kind of see it on me. Like people are like, are you good? It's really because I'm so empathic that like I'm carrying my clients like stresses on myself. And so I've been able to kind of like release a lot of that because I do welcome the release because I know that that's what people expect when they come to the shop. But I do have to take care of myself in the process, because I know
Yes.
I know me, and I'll be sad because you're sad for weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such an important point, and I think something that, maybe we don't remember as much, those of us who aren't stylists. Like, you're dealing with many people throughout the day, so it could be tough news back to back. It could
Mm-hmm.
be, something that triggers a memory or a feeling in you that you weren't
Yep.
expecting. I remember, God bless my braider here in San Diego. Her name is Sana, and I was literally about to sit down in her chair when I found out that a good friend of mine had passed away unexpectedly, and I was just like, and she had stepped out of the room. She came back in, and I'm just like weeping, and she's like, what do you need right now? And she gave me a hug. And I was like, I just need a hug, because I'm trying to understand what's happening. And the gratitude I had for her in that moment, that she didn't make it weird. She didn't make me feel bad, but also realizing like that was something she had not signed up for that day. It was like we were just going kiki like we normally do.
Yeah.
It was really important to me and special to know that, like, this is the power of having a good relationship with your stylist, and your stylist also being self-aware. So I'm glad that you have those practices. And, again, even if you're not a stylist and you're listening, like, taking notes of, like, if you're customer facing, if you're service space, I take a lot of these same things as a yoga teacher. Like, the studio space stirs up a lot of things. There's a lot of release, and it's beautiful to witness. And also, like, I have to make sure that I'm like, what's theirs is theirs, what's mine is mine. And, not internalizing, because it will eat at you and make it hard to get up the next day and do it all over again. So I have so much gratitude for you sharing so much of just your experience and what you've witnessed and how you serve. And we're going to go into our wrap up final round of the episode. So as always, listeners, Courtney, what keeps you well? What's keeping you physically and, I would say, mentally healthy right now?
Therapy. I would say that's the main
Shout out to therapy.
thing. It's been consistent now for over a year, and I'm on my third therapist. I loved all three, but I'm on my third therapist, and I am telling her, like, you're stuck with me, and if you have to go, I promise you I'm finding another one, like, soon after. I think in the past, when I've kind of had like stints of therapy, it might be like 6 months or 7 months, kind of get to this place where you're like, I'm done, or they tell you that you're done, and I'm like, no, I'm never done. I'm at the place now where it's like, if I have to budget this in, I'm just going to have to budget it in, because, like, even if I don't have like a crisis going on at the time, like, just being able to share what just went on in my last week, there's always something going on, whether it's good or bad, and having that space to release, just like I'm being, people release on me, and having like the same type of opportunity to release on someone else, especially a professional, has been keeping me sane. Like, even when things go wrong, like, knowing my therapy appointment is coming up, like, usually can kind of get me together in the meantime. So that is something that, like, I have to have for my wellness.
I appreciate it. Shout out to therapy. I'll say that every week. Shout out to therapy and the good therapists doing the good work. There is no shame, and there will be resources in the show notes if you are curious about where to start with therapy or some options. I stand. So thank you. What is keeping you wild? So keeping you inspired and creative right now?
I would say entrepreneurship. And also, like, the many ways that I pursue that, whether it's like my YouTube channel, which is kind of turned, I didn't expect it to be sort of entrepreneurship, but when I became monetized, that kind of became a business. And then Froetry, and of course, hairstyling, having the hair salon. Entrepreneurship is just, a wild ride. I know you know. And so in addition to it being kind of hard sometimes, like, just the ever evolving state of entrepreneurship, and always thinking about how I can, like, make my business better and make it, more suitable for my clients and customers. And also just, like, keeping it fresh and creative, always looking online at other businesses and, taking notes from them and all of that. It's just a constant thing. I think most of the time I'm subconsciously working on my businesses, even if it's like in my mind and not necessarily on paper or, like, physically doing things. But entrepreneurship definitely keeps me inspired all the time and creative, because like we talked about, having never ending ideas, it also is like, yeah, I'm always going to be doing that. I feel like I'm going to be an entrepreneur for the rest of my life just because it makes my life interesting.
Yeah, that's a wonderful way to put it. It makes life interesting. And there is no shortage of inspiration, but I can only imagine when it comes to hair and just the possibilities. Like that's really dope. And of course, lastly, what keeps you free? What's keeping you liberated and light right now?
So we've talked about neurodivergence, and when I read this question, definitely that came to mind, and really just accepting it, like when I've for myself, and also when I've shared with other people who are neurodivergent. It's like once you're diagnosed and you're able to really accept yourself, there's a level of freedom that comes with that. Okay, like all the things that I may have been ashamed about growing up, now that I have an explanation for these things, like I'm able to just live, and give myself grace for my shortcomings, and also like embrace the beautiful things that come with being neurodivergent. So, yeah, I feel so free, and that's why I'm so willing and, always ready to talk about it to any and everyone. Because I think a lot of the things that I would have shied away from talking about, especially when it comes like the negative things that come with, neurodivergence, whether it's just like a messy mind, a messy space, those are things that like I never would have shared with people. But now that I have an explanation and I'm able to accept it for myself, like I just feel free to tell whoever, whether it's a partner, someone who I may have like hid that from like for as long as possible because it could be embarrassing. I just feel so much more open and even more compassionate for myself and other people who may be going through the same thing. So yeah, that's it.
That's definitely a word to anybody who's wondering, what is it like for other people to know? It can be so liberating. I love that it's been liberating for you and just allows you to show up authentically. Like, this is me. And it also allows you to reclaim your power. Because, I mean, I wonder if you had the same experience, but like not knowing and then just wondering for the longest time, like, why can't I just clean my room and keep it clean? Or why can't I just remember to do XYZ? It can be a little maddening. And then when you realize like, oh, it's not just me, or it's not just me being absent-minded, it's this other thing that's beyond my control. Once you get past the shock and maybe sadness, it's like, okay.
Yeah, I think you're able to stand up for yourself too. Because like, I think the main thing I dealt with growing up, especially from my parents, is get your room clean. Like, what is going on, And I know once I got diagnosed and I was able to follow a good friend of mine, Torian, who runs Sisters with ADHD. She's so transparent. She posted like a picture of her crazy room. And I sent it to my mom and she's like, whoa, like that is literally you. And I'm like, see, like, I don't fault you. I think they could have been a little nicer when it came to like disciplining me about that. But, feeling free and being able to be like, I know you had an issue with that. And I even felt so much shame and, like you said, trying to figure out like, why can't I just get it done? And then taking Adderall for the first time and being able to knock it out and like show her like, I got it done, was just so freeing. So, yeah, it's been amazing.
I love that. Courtney, thank you so much for your wisdom and sharing everything from hair, entrepreneurship, mental health, just how you show up for your clients and yourself is super inspirational. I think really important. And again, a part of our wellness journey. It's not just about, going to the gym and eating greens. It's also thinking about your hair and how you take care of yourself. So I appreciate you. Do you have anything you'd like to plug, or how can people keep up with you? All of those things.
First, thank you so much for having me. It's just an honor to be here. I love what you do, and I'm just grateful to be a part of that. And really the main thing that I have coming up is I'm making a return to YouTube after almost a year of being off. It's definitely my favorite form of entrepreneurship that I'm doing right now, and just my favorite form of creative expression. So really excited to get back into that. You can just find me by searching my first and last name, Courtney Grayton, on YouTube, to kind of catch up on the information that I've had on there so far. And moving forward, I kind of want to find ways to weave more of my personality into my videos and do some different forms of content, whether it be just sort of talking about topics that might not be specifically about hair care, but things like what we shared today, statistics. That's why I loved you bringing that up. Things like that, studies and all of that, just getting on and having very relatable conversations. So that is what you can be on the lookout for. And of course, you can follow me on my IG or TikTok to book appointments, see the work that I do and things like that.
Awesome. And all of her stuff will be linked in the show notes as well. And as always, everyone, thank you for listening. Until next time, stay well, stay wild, and stay free. The Well Wild and Free podcast is a project of Just Free Wellbeing. It is edited and produced by Eric Hamlet. To stay in touch with us, visit Well Wild and Free on Instagram at wellwildfree or at justbreefree.com/podcast. For sources and information about the show, please visit our show notes.